Time now for the big three. In today's topics: lip service, your hometown, and this week's must read. So let's bring in my big three panel. Professor of Political Science at Hiram College, Jason Johnson. Political reporter for U.S. News and World Report, Lauren Fox. And MSNBC contributor and former Bush Cheney senior advisor, Robert Trainum. Hello to all three of you. Thanks for joining me.
Good afternoon.
So let's go first to lip service here. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, let's listen on his trying to broaden the GOP's appeal.
If you want to be consistent, if you want to grow the movement, we cannot be the party of fat cats, rich people, and Wall Street.
The states where we haven't been winning, the big states, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, we win 80% of the geography, but we lose the cities. Why are we losing the cities? Because we're not getting African-American vote. We're getting 5% of the vote. We got 3% of the vote in Detroit. I say don't give up on that vote. Go after that vote.
Talking fat cats, Wall Street, African-American vote there, and yet you have the Ryan budget, which critics say is going to make draconian cuts to social programs. So, Robert, how can Republicans defend what Rand Paul is saying is something more than just lip service?
Well, he's got a point. The point is that the Republican Party has to broaden its base, and obviously we know that from 2008 and 2012. And what's interesting about it is that he didn't mention the Latino vote, which is the largest, obviously, minority population that's growing in this country. So, you know, he does have a point about reaching out to brown people. He does have a point that it doesn't have to be just lip service to what you said a few moments ago, but it's the actual policies that you alluded to in the Ryan budget. Look, there's a lot of people out there that believe in the Ryan budget, that think that it's fiscally responsible, that believe that it puts our priorities in place. I'm not one of those individuals. I do believe that our most vulnerable in our society do have to be taken care of by the collective good. But there are a lot of individuals out there, myself included, that believe we are spending way too much money and we simply cannot afford to go down this fiscal path anymore, or we will face bankruptcy.
But the problem is that the primary voters in the Republican Party, they're not going to vote for the more moderate guys.
Well, I think it depends. I mean, I think it depends on the state. I mean, there are some primary voters in New Hampshire and Pennsylvania and so forth that are much more moderate than the evangelicals in the South. So I think it just really depends on what geographic base that you're speaking to. But it also depends on the nominee or the potential nominee. I think Jeb Bush, who is a conservative, but also has the appeal to moderates, is the right person for 2016 who can appeal not only to arch conservatives, but also to the moderates of the base, the Republican Party as well.
Okay. Lauren, President Obama spoke on Friday about Republicans and voting rights. Here's that.
The stark, simple truth is this. The right to vote is threatened today in a way that it has not been since the Voting Rights Act became law nearly 5 decades ago. Across the country, Republicans have led efforts to pass laws making it harder, not easier, for people to vote.
So, Lauren, how can Republicans broaden their base and appeal to diverse groups if, as the president contends, they're making it harder for them to vote?
Well, we have to look at so many of these Republican state legislatures who have moved over the last 3 or 4 years to pass very highly restrictive voter ID laws. And I think one of the ways that Republicans can look to broaden the base is there is work to be done on Capitol Hill. If we're talking about Rand Paul, someone who's looking at 2016, he can be one of the front runners when it comes to strengthening the Voter Rights Act. We have to remember that the Supreme Court took out a large section of that bill, and that there's been a lot of work on Capitol Hill to try to do something more there that hasn't been done yet. And I think that somebody like Rand Paul, if he wants to be that person, can step up and certainly take that role.
Okay, you know what, Jason, I'm going to ask you just to clear this all up here, because you can't have it both ways. How can Republicans reach a broader base?
Voter ID. End voter ID in all these states. That is the #1 symbolic issue that is angering African Americans and angering Latino voters and causing them to turn out at higher rates. And what's worse, voter ID caused a decrease in white voters in both Michigan, Ohio, and Florida. So Republicans are shooting themselves in the foot with a plan that they think is going to suppress the vote for Barack Obama, but it actually ended up hurting them and galvanizing the base. They need to cut that down, and then it'll probably work.
And what about the Ryan budget?
The Ryan budget's never going to work. I mean, look, everyone is angry about that, but that's mostly for policy wonks. If we're talking about the great flyover country, it is those symbolic issues like voter ID and taxes that the Republican Party keeps getting wrong. The Ryan budget is something mostly for the D.C. crowd.
Okay. Let's move on to your hometown. And I mentioned this new Gallup poll a bit earlier today. The nation's most satisfying cities. Fort Collins, Colorado is on top with nearly 95% of residents saying they're satisfied with their living there. So this question is for each of you. I want to know what your hometown is and tell me something good about it and bad about it. Robert, you first.
Sure. My hometown is Philadelphia, PA, which I happen to be at right now. You know, Philadelphians have a very strong work ethic. We're very parochial. We love our sports. And we also love our food, which is probably the bad thing about Philadelphia, just in terms of being overweight and the obesity and diabetes, the obesity and diabetic dilemma that we have here in the Keystone State.
Okay. Lauren, your hometown is something good and bad about that.
So my hometown is Kalispell, Montana, and I think that if we're going to look at a place in the country that is just stunningly beautiful, I grew up very close to Glacier National Park, so many kayak trips, hiking trips, camping trips, but I think we also have to remember that the winters are dreadfully long in a place like this, and for a kid who didn't grow up skiing, it was just a little bit too much to take.
Okay. I can't believe you wouldn't have gone out skiing. That would have been like a dream place for me. Okay, Jason, how about you?
My hometown is the DMV, the D.C., Maryland, Virginia sort of suburbs area. That's where I grew up. The best part about it is it's D.C. Everything is free. The zoo is free. The museums are free. The Smithsonian is free. It is a fantastic place to grow up. And the worst part about it is the traffic and our horrible sports teams. There's nothing that's ever going to improve about either of those things.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I'm just going to chime in. My hometown is Los Angeles, and I love everything about it. I'm like the Randy Newman song, I love L.A., except the traffic. Wow, that has gotten exponentially worse since I moved here. That's just not good. So I'm with you on the traffic there, Jason. Okay, coming up, help for all of us who are not rich, next in today's Must Reads.